all that sort of stuff. But with suffering, it's like you just don't want to stay in it. So it's like it's behind you, pushing you.
That happened to you, didn't it? In Japan, there was a point where you just had enough. And what happened? Can you explain at that moment when you decided this is it?
Well, I mean, no, it was suffering most of the time there. But there was a meditation retreat. It was my last week there. And there was a week's meditation retreat. And before the retreat, it was like I felt, okay, this is it. I'm just going to make the most of it, really get into it. And the day before, I started to feel sick. There was this woman who'd come over from America, and she'd had this terrible bronchial thing. She ended up getting bronchial pneumonia, and it just went right through the whole monastery. And I was one of the first ones to get it, and it was just before the retreat. And I don't often get sick, but all I could do during that retreat was just survive. Rather than trying to do anything, get anywhere, I just had to completely give up. And that's what happened. I just gave up doing anything. And just survived the retreat, did every sitting, and I did. It's not like I felt ecstatic or anything, but I can see now that was perfect. It was what I needed, because I'd been working so hard before that. And that wasn't the end. There was another 6 months of really adjusting to the whole thing, and there was still some. I did a few retreats that were quite difficult. But I can see that was the turning point. Yeah, the real turning point.
Actually, my next question was, what was the change in viewpoint or perspective that happened to you when that came about? Like what is that shift in viewpoint from?
Well, it's a shift of seeing me as the centre of the universe,
right?
To losing that reference point that you're so used to using. Everything didn't revolve around me anymore. It was more like I just revolved around everything else, or there wasn't any I just became everything else.
Right. Yes. So how do you recognise that a true enlightenment's taken place? One for yourself, and then for a student seeking a teacher that's enlightened.
Well, for me, there wasn't any question about it. Before that time, I was always questioning myself. There was always some doubt. I'd have some sort of experience and think, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. I was always hoping maybe this is it. But when I knew it had happened, when that just stopped, and that's probably why it took time too, because I didn't realise that I'd stopped asking about it, because I was in it. Whereas before that, I was still wondering whether this was it. But there's no wonder anymore. There's just it.
Yes.
There are no questions about it at all. I didn't feel like I needed any sort of confirmation from anyone. I mean, I did tell my teacher, but what had happened, but I didn't really care what he said. I didn't feel like I needed any confirmation at all. Whereas before that, I always wanted his approval. I was always seeking his approval and encouragement, and that just all went.
Yeah.
I didn't need anyone's approval.
Okay. And what about a student that's seeking an enlightened teacher? I mean, how do they gauge? What are the signs or the marks of enlightenment? What should they be looking for in a teacher?
No, it's a difficult one, really, because I know to me now I can see it. And before, I suppose I could see it to an extent too. I think a depth that you feel is lacking in yourself.
Okay.
A depth, stillness. I mean, there are some teachers around who have probably had had quite a strong awakening, but they're not really fully there. It's difficult because before enlightenment you're so used to judging things on the surface, so you judge things like enlightenment by people's behaviour. And I know I used to do that too. You know, I'd see someone like Barry Long in the supermarket and think, he doesn't look very happy, you know. He's looking at the ingredients just like everyone else. And the thing is, you become completely ordinary.
Yeah.
And it's often difficult to spot.
So, what hope is there of an unenlightened person recognising the enlightenment before them? I mean, there's people that come and go in your meditation centre. Some stay, some go. How and what is it that...
I think if you're really ready, you do recognise it.
Okay.
And some people just aren't quite ready, and some are. You recognise that depth. And I think it's mainly a depth, and maybe it's sort of mixed with a simplicity, an ordinariness.
Yes.
Is that a word?
Yeah.
Ordinariness?
I guess so, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Okay, so what's the value of a teacher? Why do we need a teacher?
Because it's so easy to become deluded. It's so incredibly easy to become deluded.
And how does the teacher help you? Like, he keeps you on track by pointing it out when it's not the real thing.
Sometimes I just had to look at my teacher and I knew that.
Okay.
And this would be after seeing him a few days before, and I'd become, I could sometimes become deluded in that time. I mean, you need the encouragement of a teacher, and you need a teacher who's still in the body, so that there's not that separation of death, because people see someone who's dead as something different, something separate. And it's quite easy to idolise someone who's dead too.
Yeah.
But someone who's alive, you can question them and you can see in their eyes your own potential. There's that connection between you.
And what motivates you to teach?
Sounds a bit corny, but compassion.
Okay.
Compassion.
Yeah.
What else do I do? I mean, I know how much I suffered, and seeing people who are willing to go through it really fills me with compassion, love. It's worth anything to really be in this state. I know that's what I felt when I was doing my practice, and I can see it in some of my students, this earnestness and determination to really realise this.
And I guess maybe it'd be good to share what the practice is. What do you do? What sort of meditation is it?
Well, it's basic Zen Buddhist meditation, really. I mean, I was always attracted to Zen Buddhism because, well, not always, it was only really the last couple of years of my practice that I got deeply into it. But before that it was basic Buddhist practice anyway. It's just such a simple method. I mean, the actual, what you go through doesn't feel simple, but it's a very simple, quite austere practice with very few rituals. Very little theory. I mean, the way I teach is really ritual free and theory free. I feel practice is the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Just practice.